one of the great cosmic beings who expresses the divine God quality of victory, also known as the Tall Master. Upon first stepping forth from out the great silence, delivered a wonderful instruction on the activity of the Blessed Holy Kumaras, explaining that thanks to their intercession many millions of years ago, these 7 holy ones acting in absolute harmony and concert one with the others have resolved to regularly release a tremendous impetus of their light to, as it were, advance the consciousness of the entire race of mankind on this planet higher up towards the return home. This impetus comes, as explained by Mighty Victory, roughly every 2,000 to 2,500 years cyclically, in the form of an outpouring of their God consciousness and that of many others within the very heart of the realm of eternal being that we also refer to as the Great Central Sun. In this age, that outpouring comes forth primarily through the impetus of the great secret love star. And it forms the cosmic momentum of the hierarchy of light that is all-encompassing on the vast scale of our entire world. Not only the physical earth, but the inner planes of the world as well are all bathed in this cosmic light, the 9 points of the secret love star. Together with this tremendous outpouring, there is the impetus for the establishing of a new understanding of the Godhead, if you will, a new religious understanding, a new world religion. In this era, that is the I Am faith, the 7-rayed religion of the dawning golden age. It is during these intervals that a more than ordinary grace is afforded the Brotherhood of Light, the hierarchy that works in association with this world. A grace that is not karmically merited by the mankind of earth, but is truly a mercy of the law that is given with the fond compassion and hope that it will turn the tide of the downward spirals of civilizations and elevate the divine spark within the heart of the race of mankind up into a higher level. When Lord Maitreya spoke of hierarchy as the key to your freedom, he was referring to this impetus, this more than ordinary grace that shortens the time of each life stream's travail. By the mercy of the violet flame, And by the added periodic impetus of the ascended masters stepping through as they are doing at the Temple of the Presence, addressing mankind as well as their conscious disciples, in the fond resolve and determination to lift mankind into a reawakening, a divine illumination of their own mighty I Am presence. During these epochs of these outpourings from the Kumaras, the forgotten memory of the hierarchy of light that stretches with an unbroken continuity as a golden chain of cosmic beings, ascended masters, angels, archangels, and Chohans, is revealed to mankind. And so you have drawn aside the veil of ignorance and of superstition, and there is held up before the gaze of all the prospect that all of heaven, the hosts of heaven, are available to the mankind of earth in that one glyph of the divine hierarchy that is reaching out and ever so desirous of doing all that is permissible to raise the mankind of earth up. We are on the cusp, at the very beginning, of one such outpouring from the Holy Kumaras. Oh, it has been going on for a few decades, but it is destined to go on for millennia. The impetus of that outpouring is best absorbed and harnessed by those who, first of all, become aware of it and then have the faith in its reality and its tangibility, and are able to enter into paying the admission price to abide forever within the realms of that outpouring of light. One of the ways in which you can appreciate the priceless gift that this outpouring represents is to look back upon all of recorded history. And even the stone and bronze and iron and Paleolithic ages that preceded recorded history. What do you find as it relates to hierarchy? You find blindness. You find ignorance. You find the world rife with the coarsest forms of mortal superstition. Nowhere is there the prospect of sons and daughters rising up from this world, all entering into their own divine parent, their own divine identity, and having once achieved that freedom for themselves, not abandoning this world, leaving it to its own devices, but rather entering into a conscious, cooperative effort with one another and with the one presence of God, into that spiritual and transcendent organization that has come down to us as the Brotherhood of Light, or, if you will, the Brotherhood of the pure white light that includes all of the rainbow rays. In between these cycles of the outpourings, then, tragically, most of the race consciousness and memory of the very existence of the Brotherhood is lost. And hence, although the masters may and do continue to work from behind the veil, invisibly visible, there are certain constraints that are wisely applied by the lords of karma that do not permit them to go public, if you will, with the reality of their existence. What remains during the lull between these outpourings are whatever artifacts of the previous epochs may survive the test of time. For our current age, one of the most ancient of such relics is the mute face of the Egyptian Sphinx, older by many thousands of years than even the Great Pyramid. Imagine yourself coming upon this, the remains of this statue in the shifting sands, and trying to carry on a conversation with that Sphinx, which was to the Egyptians many things, amongst them chiefly exhibiting the God quality of divine guardianship and protection. For many thousands of years, that Sphinx has been speechless, yet it remains as a silent sentinel, attesting to the former glory of a previous epoch when the Brotherhood was renowned amongst the mankind of Earth. The reasons for the withdrawal of the masters is something that we will unveil very shortly, at least some of the reasons for that. So you have that stark contrast of travelers from different lands, or even the people born in the last few thousands of years under the shadow of that Sphinx, puzzling over what could it possibly have meant when it was originally fashioned. Who were the ones who inspired it? And what was the service that it was intended to render? Why do we care about that right now? We ought to care because we are in a window of time when we don't have to be befuddled by the mystery of the mute Sphinx staring blankly into space as a stark relic of ages past when the masters were at work in the world. We live in an epoch, beginning with that pioneering work of the Mahatmas of the East, Master Morya, beloved Kuthumi, even our own Lord Mahachohan, Lord Maitreya, and others of the Chohans, who began ever so slightly to lift the veil to their very existence. A humorous anecdote was wryly observed by the first messenger trained by these Mahatmas and sent forth into the world. She observed that prior to her identifying beloved Kuthumi, the world of spiritualism was void of any reference to Kuthumi. But once his name was made public, all of a sudden, every medium, every seance, every slate writer was receiving messages from Kuthumi, quote unquote. And to her, this was an absolute desecration of the sacredness, not only of the master's name, but of the master's consciousness, reducing a very august personage to a mere caricature of that which he represented. Nevertheless, it began the process that is now coming into one of its great waves of fruition through the Ascended Master's activity of the Temple of the Presence. For the Brotherhood is no longer removed into their mountain retreats. They are no longer hidden away and only referenced obliquely in symbology or parable or mythology. But they stand forth in the world. And that is the meaning of the glyph of hierarchy as that glorious Pharos. It is not hidden away in the retreats. It is not something that is a relic of the past. It is not something that is so transcendent in the higher octaves as to be unreachable. It is rather lowered and brought forth, if you will, at sea level, where mankind engage in commerce, in travel, where the Pharos is now the guardian of the safe harbor, where the pilgrim, mariner, or traveler may come into port, as Proclus likes to call it, the paternal harbor, that is the port of safety for the pilgrim life streams of this world. Mighty Victory's temple, circular in nature, can be understood with the shield of Elohim as the circle of the 12 mighty Elohim, high in the upper atmosphere, symbolic of the nirvanic realms and the realms of the great central sun. Directly beneath the 12 Elohim on each of their corresponding rays is to be found the focus of the 12 archangels and the angelic hosts who serve the ray. And there is certainly a stepping down, hierarchically speaking and metaphysically speaking. There is a lowering and a medium of transmission, whereby there is a transformation of the high energies of the Elohim received by the archangels and broadcast far and wide across the face of the earth. You can see it almost as a dome, a pantheon with the Elohim uppermost, the archangels as a central tier, middlemost, and then at the level of the pavement, at the level where the congregation would assemble, there stand the pillars of the hierarchy of the Chohans of the rays. When you encounter these beloved Chohans, you find that for the most part, they meet you where you are. In the Brotherhood of Light, there are many spiritual offices. And part of the function or the office of the Chohans of the 7 rays and the 5 secret rays is to pin the various currents of the consciousness of God that is exhibited in the 7 rays and the 5 secret rays, to anchor those rays in the earth. So El Moria anchors the first ray of the will of God in the earth. So Hilarion, by his devotion, anchors the flame of truth in the altars of the Brotherhood in the earth element. So Serapis Bey, by his devotion to the flame of purity of God consciousness, keeps alive the flame, the ascension current, and the flame of purity here upon the earth. Each of these Chohans in turn serve that function, so that when you encounter those Chohans, it can be deceptively human. They can appear to be like you, though they are divine, because they maintain such a focus of their consciousness. Not all by any means, for all ascended masters have their home in the heart of the great central sun, which is the home of all mighty I Am presences. But a greater percentage, a greater portion of their consciousness is by design and by dispensation permitted to hobnob with mankind, to move in and amongst the mankind of earth for the purposes of anchoring the flames of the rays, and for the purposes of mediating, having that final step of mediation for the mankind of earth. We talked about the mute sphinx in ancient Egypt that is there to this very day. Greece had its own counterpart, similar to, but not identical with that of the Egyptians. The story is told that outside of the city of Thebes, a certain sphinx, feminine in nature, made its lair and accosted all who would travel to or from the city of Thebes, and posited to one and all the same question. And if they were able to answer the question accurately, they could pass on. Whereas if they were dumbfounded by the question, then they did not live. So naturally, the question was met with ignorance. The question was, what creature is it that walks upon four legs when in its infancy, on two legs during its majority, and on three legs during its final aging years of seniority? The son of the former king, Oedipus by name, had his own confrontation and was able to answer the riddle of the Sphinx, explaining that the answer was mankind, or any one individual who as an infant crawled on all fours, as a youth and an adult walked on two, and as a feeble elderly person used a cane, and thus was walking on three legs. The people of Thebes were so pleased, actually, upon this answer being given, it was the Sphinx herself who succumbed and passed away. And the people of Thebes were so grateful to Oedipus for his deliverance that they crowned him the king of their city and their kingdom. The Sphinx, in this sense, is posing the question that nature and all of life in this earthly experience is constantly, silently speaking to all of humanity, whether they realize it or not. The question, truly put, is what is man? Or woman, if you will. What does it truly mean to be a human being? And the one who can rightfully answer that question will be crowned with the authority of their own inherent royalty. We have said many times that the Brotherhood of Light has labored hard and long for many thousands of years to forge the correct and highest truth in answer to that question. What is the true and innate nature to an individual human being? For many people in the world today, the answer to that question is that human beings are at present at the top of the heap of the evolutionary cycle of this world because they have an opposing thumb. They can make tools. They have learned to beat down all the other animal species. So for the present time, they seem to be the king of the jungle, outplacing even the lion. Those are the atheists of the world. For others, human beings are creatures created by a creator God who exists as souls created by a God that has no truck with them. They are a separate evolution of human beings created by God to sing praises to him, to glorify him, perhaps to make sacrifices to him, to be obedient to God, but have no part in the divine family. Whereas it has been the life's work of numberless messengers and initiates who have been granted lifetimes of embodiment in this world to explain that question, explaining that the true nature of individual human beings is that they are the outer expression, each and every one of them, of a Godhead charioteer, an individualization of the Godhead. Not separate from the Godhead, but part of the divine family, who must come into their own, who must make room for the love, wisdom, and power, the will of their presence, the will of their individual God itself, to be expressed through themselves when they can awaken out of the sleep and dream state that is the human experience. And that is the great proclamation of the Brotherhood of Light to the mankind of earth, to one and all across the world. The cry is this: God individualized, one God, one presence, many sons, many daughters of God, all coming to the fruition of their long pilgrimage here into this world, with the full assistance of the hierarchy of the Chohans, the archangels, the Elohim, the cosmic beings, all of the kingdoms of God's creation, including elemental life and the angelic hosts. All of these in service to the unascended Godhead charioteers and mighty I am presences of unascended mankind, with the goal in mind for them to take the victory of their ascension in this time. The Sphinx of Greece symbolized as well the old earth religions of the past, dying away and yielding to the era of the Olympians that was heralded by Orpheus, by Hesiod, by Homer, by Plato, by Pythagoras and others. The Olympian deities who were a prototype, if you think about it for a moment, they were a prototype generation of an organized family. For the Brotherhood of the Ascended Masters truly is one family of brothers and sisters with the great I Am as the God, the Father, Mother, God. So the Olympians were one of the efforts to broaden the horizon, that there were these deities known so well to the Mahachohan who could enter into a theogony, a divine interaction with the mankind of earth. Those glyphs are captured and portrayed by the Mahachohan so magnificently in the Iliad, in the Odyssey, in the Aeneid, and in the prayers and hymns of Orpheus and the traditions that he bequeathed to the Western world in that embodiment as well. All of these were a precursor to a full understanding of the glorious chain of hierarchy that reaches from the highest realms of heaven to these outer realms of the earth. One would think that when the Ascended Masters come and offer up to the disciples on the path of all persuasions their opportunity to know themselves as the individuality that they are in their own I am presence, that alone would be enough to sweep aside all else and to catapult the world instantly into a great acclamation for a dawning golden age. That this does not happen, or it has not happened thus far, should not be in any way a consternation to those who have found the voice of the ascended masters resonating through their world, for those who have discovered their own individual mighty I am presence in their lives. For there are certain elements in the mortal consciousness that must be consumed before that closer walk can come to pass. The question has been hurled as a challenge even to the disciples of this Ascended Master activity and hurled into the psyche of all Ascended Master students far and wide across the face of the earth. How it has come to be that the Ascended Masters do not step forth to the masses and compel them to have faith, regardless of their skepticism and doubts and fears. Why has this not been done? It's very telling that when the correspondence with beloved Kuthumi began, the very first Mahatma letter that was ever written by Kuthumi was in reply to one from a lay Chela who had a bright idea. He wrote to Kuthumi and said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We are going to take the London Times and transport it in the twinkling of an eye from London, England to Bombay, one of the other large cities of the Indian subcontinent. And it is going to be there probably 3 weeks before that same paper could travel by steamboat from England to India. And because it will be there and on display for the whole world in India to see, it will be undeniable and irrefutable proof of the existence of the Mahatmas and of the spiritual truths of cosmic law. This was in the wisdom of the hierarchs above Kuthumi was deemed unwise and not permissible. Nor did we find the case of Master Morya or Kuthumi coming down out of the Himalayas and before hundreds of and thousands and tens of thousands of people giving demonstrations of their abilities. Now, human rationality would seem to say, okay, if such irrefutable proof were to be given, it would convince everybody. And being convinced, they would change their ways, knowing the truths that these Mahatmas were espousing, together with their demonstrations of their ability to prove the law. Why is it deemed unwise and premature to do such things? The answer is likely to astonish you. The answer is that in the records of the history of the so-called educated races that re-embody in this world, in the record of those, there are those times when those kinds of irrefutable proofs were, in fact, given to the multitudes. Case in point are the many multitudes who witnessed the healings of Jesus, the multiplication of the loaves and fishes, and so forth. And Jesus, on various occasions, upbraided them for the fact that they did not reform. Why is this true? Because there is, in the outer consciousness of mankind, there still remains the desire to hold on to the momentums of misqualification that are part of the human soul, and to hold on to these stubbornly at all costs, in defiance of all proof positive to the contrary. And that, unfortunately, creates such rejection of the ascended masters in that tremendous extreme example of their physical presence. Such a rejection generates a more fierce karma, the most fierce karma of ignorance and of human limitation, when the light is thus rejected in that way. And so you do have the phenomenon here in this world that when the Roger Bacons of the world, the Francis Bacons of the world, two prominent embodiments of our beloved Saint Germain, when they become too fervent in the example that they set before the world, they become a threat to the powers that be, then there is the attack that is leveled against them. Master Moria himself was not immune to that very thing. In almost all of the embodiments that you know of and some that you do not know of, his strong stand for the light and the truth meant that he paid with his life for that stand for the truth. He did so as Hector, he did so as Becket, as Thomas More, and on the list goes. So the world has quite often rejected the masters in the fullness of the light in which they come. So this is something that still operates today. One example of it was captured intuitively by a poet, Alfred Lord Tennyson, as he, in his imagination, scrolled through the records of the interaction with El Moria as King Arthur, when Moria sought to bring forth a miniature Fabergé gem, Fabergé egg of a little golden age known as Camelot. The stories grew over the centuries, and Building upon those stories, Alfred Lord Tennyson himself plumbed those Akashic records of those times and pointed out some of these typical behaviors of human nature. Take, for example, someone that you would think would be in perfect bliss in the role that she played. I'm speaking now of Arthur's queen, Guinevere. Here she was, having the full devotion and fidelity of her lord, who lifted her into that highest position side by side with him on the throne. But when that human element is still entertained, if it is not dealt with forthrightly, the best service rendered by Moria, in this case Arthur, still comes to a breach. And it's very interesting. At one place, Tennyson fast forwards to the end of the cycle when a war is being fought between the followers of Lancelot and Guinevere and the followers of Arthur. And he comes to forgive her one last time, and she wants him back, and she wants to have things, she wants to be where she was before, but all the while having created this record that exists. And here is one of the most important parts of this psychology that exists whenever the hierarchy of the Brotherhood of Light comes into interaction with mortal consciousness. The setup for this little episode takes place when there is a jousting tournament about to be held. Lancelot and Guinevere and Arthur are all together, and King Arthur says to Lancelot, "It's time for you and I to go to the jousting match." And Lancelot says, "My old wounds are bothering me. I can't make it to go to the joust today." And so Arthur goes on. "Sir King, mine ancient wound is hardly whole, and keeps me from the saddle." The king glanced first at Lancelot and then Guinevere, and went his way. No sooner gone than suddenly Guinevere began. "Fie, my lord Lancelot, much to blame. Why go ye not to these fair jousts? The knights are half of them our enemies, and the crowd will murmur, 'Oh, the shameless ones who take their pastime, now the trustful king is gone.' Lancelot, the flower of bravery, Guinevere, the pearl of beauty, our knights at feast have pledged us in this union, and whilst the king would listen, smiling, how then is there more? Has Arthur spoken aught, or would you yourself now weary of my service?" Guinevere broke. In other words, Guinevere is asking Lancelot, "Do you think Arthur has any idea of our affair?" And he says no. Then Guinevere broke into a little scornful laugh. "Arthur, my lord Arthur, the faultless king, that passionate perfection, my goodly lord, who can gaze upon the sun in heaven. Arthur never spoke word of reproach to me, has never glimpsed mine untruth. Yet he cares not truly for me, is only here today with a gleam of suspicion. For he is all wrapped in the fancy of his table round, swearing men to vows that are impossible, to make those knights like himself. But friend, to me Arthur is all fault, who hath no fault at all. For who loves me must have a touch of earth. It is the low sun that makes the colors, and thus I am yours. So in other words, Guinevere is saying his faultlessness is his fault. And I need a touch of this earthy to complete me. And hence I have entered into this relationship with you. Thus I am yours. In another place where she is reminiscing about meeting Arthur and being married to him, which is now lost to Guinevere, she says this as well. Blessed be the king who hath forgiven my wickedness toward him, and left me hope that in mine own heart I may live down the sin, and be his mate hereafter in heaven, before the high God. Great and gentle Lord, who wast, as is the conscience of a saint, amongst his warring senses to my knights, to whom my false pride, that took full easily all impressions from below, would not look up or half despise the height, to which I would not or could not climb. I thought I could not breathe that fine air, that purity, that pure severity of the perfect light, and yearned for the warmth and color which I found in Lancelot. Again, the charge of the Ascended Master consciousness, that stainless purity and perfection of the Ascended Master light, was something that Guinevere, though married to him, though given freely to her, she disdained that and elected instead to continue to feed the desires and the momentums of the outer self. And that in miniature is the human condition which the Ascended Masters must contend with as they seek to bring abroad the Ascended Master world religion of the I Am faith. Some feel that the numbers of our congregations should include the multitudes coming as they are. And in one sense, it is absolutely correct that none shall prevent those coming to the light. None are prevented from coming, save those who, in the presence of that sterling, admittedly at times apparently austere perfection and stainless purity of Ascended Master fire, find it too rarefied, find it to them apparently sterile of the colors of this outer world. So they're not yet ready to wean themselves of those outer accoutrements that are a part of this life. And there is this sophistry that the standards of the ascended masters in their activity should be lowered to accommodate all. Come as you are, and to have everything amalgamated and made room for here. When the truth of the matter is that there is a certain law that is absolutely impersonal, which is the law of the being of the mighty I Am presence, which is the immutable laws of life, and the certain presence that when the ascended masters come, nothing can be where they are save the purity of that light which they are. And so either if students or life streams are to progress on the path, whatever remains of the earthy within them must be surrendered. It must be put down. It must be given into the violet flame, and room made for each one's own Christ presence to descend and to fill the vehicle of their consciousness with its light. This is quite a challenge for the masters when they come, as they must do here, without really holding in the aura of their ascended master light and perfection. That is the standard of the Brotherhood. And it means that this symbol of the Pharos is a symbol of the Brotherhood, of the hierarchy, lowering into this outer world that which is going on in the great central sun, carving out a little God's little acre wherever possible on the altar of every torchbearer of the temple ideally, and holding that charge where only God can abide, where only God's reality can be present, and holding that come what may. There is one final example of this, which possibly could have been saved until the appropriate master and his presence, his ray comes about. It's an episode in the early life of Saint Germain's embodiment as Plato, but it speaks to this very subject that we are on at present. Early in his life, Plato was a raconteur. He was one of the beautiful people of Athens at his time. Very gifted and drawn to the lilting melodies of the muses. And he was looking forward to a career as a poet and a playwright. And in that role, he had friends and acquaintances and hangers-on and followers in the hundreds and the thousands who flocked to his residence in ancient Athens and were happy to be a part of all of the patter and the banter and the jocularity and the revelry that was going on as a part of the happiness of that outer life experience. Then came the turning point of his life upon encountering the somewhat dour figure of Socrates, whose life is the story of another time. But suffice it to say, that Socrates kindled a consciousness within the young Plato. And it's here that we pick up our story. Plato had composed various kinds of poetry. You know, he had that ability, which he expressed quite freely as Francis Bacon. And he was ready to go into a contest. Back then, they actually had contests for the best poems and the best plays. He was ready to go into the lists contesting for the prize of the best tragedy. In time, though, Plato came to understand the greater superiority of the good over the beautiful life. The beautiful accomplishes the true only through the reflected image in art, while the good itself is brought about in the depths of true being. This attraction to the good became the most rare and powerful magnet, something that the senses have no share in. Socrates showed Plato the inferiority of outer beauty and glory that he had believed in until that moment, compared to the transcendent beauty and glory of divine truth. The pomp of outer art merely reflects for an instant deceptive truth under disguise, whereas the shining and eternal beauty, the splendor of the true, displaced the changing, deceptive beauty within Plato's heart and soul. And thus, abandoning and forgetting all he loved previously, he gave himself over to the love of wisdom in the very flower of his youth. Plato's friends were awaiting him to make his great conquest and debut in poetry on the tragic stage. And he invited them to his home for a great anticipatory celebration. And they were all astonished that he wanted to have this banquet ahead of time, for it was customary only to celebrate after you had won the prize, when the winning tragedy had already been played upon the stage. Nevertheless, no one refused an invitation to the home of the son of a rich nobleman, where the muses and the graces met with the company of the young god of love. For a long time, his house had been a rendezvous for all of the elegant youths and up-and-coming men of Athens. Plato spent a veritable fortune on this banquet. The table was set in the garden. Young men with torches lit the way for all the guests. 3 courtesans of Athens attended. The banquet continued throughout the entire night. There were hymns to love and to Bacchus. The flute players danced, and at long last Plato was asked to recite some of his poems. Smilingly he arose and said, "This banquet is the last I shall give, for beginning today I renounce all the pleasures of life in order to dedicate myself to wisdom and to following the teachings of Socrates and those wise ones of the ages. Knowing then, I even renounce poetry, for I recognize its inability to express fully the truth that I seek. No longer then will I compose verses, and in your presence I will put to the fire all that I have thus far composed." A loud cry of amazement and protest arose from the table, around which all the guests, wearing their crowns of roses, were lying on their sumptuous couches. faces red with wine, gaiety, and table talk, expressed surprise and indignation. Amongst the gentlemen, there were the sophists, who laughed in incredulity and scorn. They considered Plato's project the height of folly and even sacrilege. They challenged him and urged him to renounce that which he had just affirmed. But Plato confirmed his decision with a calmness and assurance that would not tolerate turning back. He concluded by saying, "I thank you all, and all who have wished to partake in this celebration, but I will henceforth only count as friends those who are the lovers of true wisdom." These words passed across this party like a cold breath over a field of flowers. Happy faces turned sad, and troubled looks appeared, and everyone all of a sudden acted as if they were part of a funeral. The courtesans quickly arose and had themselves borne away on their litters, casting backward hateful glances at the master of the house. The sophists too disappeared with ironic, challenging epithets. "Farewell, Plato. Try to be happy. You'll return to us soon enough." Only two remained with Plato. He took these faithful friends by the hands, and leaving the scene of the party, the half-empty jugs of wine, the roses, the lyres, the flutes overturned, the full cups, led these two into the inner courtyard. There they saw already prepared a pile on an altar, a pyramid of all of the works of his poetry. Taking a torch, the smiling poet set fire to the pyramid with these words, "Come, God of fire, Plato has need of thee." When the flames finally flickered out, those friends were in tears and bid him farewell for the morning. Plato remained, but did not weep. Instead, a peace and a wonderful serenity filled his whole being. He meditated on Socrates, whom he was about to see. And the light of the dawn touched the terraces of the houses, the columns and the pediments of the temples, and the first rays of aurora lit up Athena's helmet and her spear from her statue, glistening on top of the Acropolis. There again, you have the example of when a member of the Brotherhood comes in the mantle of the presence, comes in the office that they have, and unfurl that, all the well-wishers, all the fair weather friends, they fade into the background. They move away. This phenomenon is being reenacted every Sunday across the world today. There are tambourines, there are electric guitars, drums, sets. There are all manner of entertainments served up in the mega churches of America and around the world, pandering to this desire of mankind to feed their own immediate revelry in the things that they already want. It's as if someone put their hand up to the wind and said, well, what is it that people want today? Let me discover what it is so I can serve it up. And sure enough, the pews will be full in that case. But that is not true leadership. It is not the leavening of the consciousness with the leaven of the ascended master light. That is the true meaning of hierarchy. The Pharos is your symbol of this interaction of the Brotherhood coming forth publicly and unveiling those things which were hidden as a part of the old occult law that are now proclaimed from the rooftops and calling those who would be the quick, those who would be the elect, to come and receive that light and that momentum. That is our service at the Temple of the Presence. Decades before the Temple of the Presence received the dispensation which we have today, it was already alive on the altar of the heart of the Master of the First Ray. In the garden of Moria's heart, he expressed the lispings of the Chohan of the First Ray for this movement into the world. And he sent forth this call that was a summoning, a call to spiritual arms, a call to all of the quick to awaken and to answer and rally to that call and raise his temple. So you are invited now to stand and with full throat of your own heart and head and hand, in the office of your own Christ presence and mighty I am presence, with the hierarchy of the light, to give this call. One last glyph for you to consider as it relates to this work. One of the superstitions that is perpetuated to this very day in many of the world religions is that there are these irrefutable horoscope type timelines that are superimposed from on high by the Godhead. It's true in Christianity as well. The idea that God will act to bring about deliverance to the mankind of earth, totally independent of the cooperation of mankind and their free will. That is a lie and an ignorant superstition. It applies to you personally, and it applies to not only each individual life stream, but it applies to nations. It applies to civilizations. And that is why we must work in conjunction with the Ascended Masters, because it takes unascended life streams using their free will to make the calls to the Ascended Masters and to the Mighty I Am Presence for that free will election to be acted upon by the Ascended Masters. So it is our opportunity to be the hands and feet of this hierarchy, to take upon ourselves the Christ virtues of responsibility and of sacrifice, necessity, of constancy, of practicality, of obedience, of hierarchy, to take these things and to work in conscious cooperation with the Ascended Masters to advance this cause of the dawning golden age far and wide across the face of the earth. And it is in that spirit that we invite you to give with us the summoning. Page 52. Please rise. Raising the temple. O hidden temple of the unknown, giver of living waters, great healer of the universe, soul ever watchful over worldly terrors, at last mine eyes behold thy face, and in thy untempered light bathe thy faithful servant, who has chosen thee to be his whole possession. I am the mighty pillar of the temple. Approach, ye vigilant ones. I am summoning the wise ones. The time of the crowning of the temple is close at hand. Address thyself reverently to the temple. New and useful ones will gather, and the tree of life in the midst of the temple will flourish. Let those whose name thy speak arise and build my temple. Let such as these, illumined by spirit, walk boldly into the temple. Let the dance of Maya falter before the temple. Let the right hand of God assert itself. Let his voice proclaim the dawn of day. One temple for all one God. I summon ye all to bring white stones and lay the foundation for my temple. Teach others by my word, and wisdom will flourish. A new temple shall we raise. Uphold thy light and illumine the beauties of my temple. Direct thy forces toward the enlightenment of mankind. Carefully raise up the treasure of the temple upon Moria's mountain. We lay white stones for the steps to the resplendent temple. My breath shall warm thy hands, and I shall guide thee along the path that leads to the temple shining atop Moria's mountain. Amidst the unfathomable tumult of life do we erect our temple. Keep watch upon the school and strive to conceive the eternal structure. Under my banner shall I assemble new men and women. Dedicate thyself to the task of gathering these people and erecting my temple with your hands. Tarry not at Moria's call. Be steadfast and lay thy pathway unto me. Moria's temple summoned the noblest among the builders. The call comes even in the midnight hour. Be alert and patient in thy watch. The teacher is manifest. The name of Messiah is pronounced in my temple. Not to small things are ye witness. The resplendent cloud above Moria's mountain will be dispersed. The lightning of my word illumines the abyss. The temple is glowing and our path is fixed. I am the mighty pillar of the temple. Approach, ye vigilant ones. I am summoning unto the temple new ones, beautiful ones, sensitive ones, exalted ones. Gather these people under my roof. Moria's temple is erected by the plow of labor. Let those whose name I speak arise and build my temple. Let such as these, illumined by spirit, walk boldly into the temple. Let the dance of Maya falter before the temple. Let the right hand of God assert itself. Let his voice proclaim the dawn of day. Wherefore to try thee if the temple be not erected, but the plan is in our hands and the foundation is laid. Thy temple is a wonder to me. One day more and thy flower is growing. Thou art pronouncing the words of the building of the temple. I see a smile and hear even laughter. Blessed art thou if thou, laying stones, can cement them with laughter. Joy, joy, joy to the world. Love God. Picture him as a wondrous martyr living only for the good of the world. Trustingly and daringly knock at the door of his temple and receive new strength. I am carrying the chalice covered with a shield. Why is there dust in the place of sacrifice? Neither sport nor play can there be where the temple is being built. Where is the garment in which to ascend the steps of the temple? When ye erect the temple of beauty, and on its approaches lay out my garden of joy, then name this garden in my name. For I told you, children, rejoice. Warrior, is it possible to enter the Holy of Holies of the temple with spear and sword, thus understanding prayer and achievement, glorified by beauty, strongly embracing power in sacrifice? Thou wilt attain the temple. We wish to see the temple beautiful and alive. None shall expel those walking to the light. I am the mighty pillar of the temple. Approach, ye vigilant ones.